Hello, it is I, Chris Brogan. Welcome to the brief for Tuesday, the 21st of November, 2017. If this is your first time viewing the show, what the brief is a whole bunch of stories that relate in some way to some form of technology or other future idea that might in some way impact your business or life. I read all these things, find some different articles, get shared articles by people like you, and then I share them with you. If you want to follow along without my pretty beautiful dulcet voice and my handsome good looks, you can always just go to chrisbrogan.com/cbm and you can see the most recent episode of the brief listed out, and you can click through all the links yourself. You don't need me to tell these stories for you, but since we're both here, we might as well. My very first story talks about blockchain. I've been talking a lot about blockchain because it is a really important technology. It's coming now, not soon, and it's one of those technologies where you're not going to think much about it until it's suddenly everywhere, and so I want you to get ahead of it. So will blockchain impact real estate? Big time. Everything inside of real estate has a lot of potential disruption coming from the blockchain platform. What basically blockchain does is has a whole bunch of distributed secure ledger type systems, which means that it takes all kinds of records and transactions and shares them around in such a way that they can't necessarily be altered in any way, and so that everyone gets a chance to see and follow along with them. If you think about it, in real estate, that's a huge bit of what real estate is. There's tracks, deeds, lands, all that kind of stuff, the financials, there's the disclosures, compliance, inspections, and all that kind of stuff that is all currently being handled through mostly paperwork. And so, of course, blockchain is going to deeply impact something like real estate, and it's going to be soon, sometimes now, and not something deep future. So you really need to pick up some more information about blockchain. If you want, go to chrisbrogan.com/blockchain. I've started collecting resources. I think that will be valuable for you. So here's a question. Why does it feel like we really have not as much time? We are doing less work than our grandparents and our other ancestors, and we still feel really pressured for time. Our view of time has changed. One reason is that we look at free time a little different. We think of time as money. Of course, people are working from home a lot more often. That's one challenge. Another is we're spending more hours in the office. But the biggest reason that we feel that we don't have as much time as we used to comes down to one simple, and you know it already, detail: devices. We spend so much of our free time on our little glowing boxes that it ends up being a problem for us and a challenge. So that is the reason why we seem to feel like we don't have as much time. The article is totally worth checking out, though. There's a lot more to it. Would you trust a bot with making sure you don't have too much to drink? Evidently, there's a new chat bot that is launched in New Zealand called SoberSelf, and what it allows for is to take care of yourself. So 11,000 different people in New Zealand have also already signed up for SoberSelf. And what this does is it talks about helping you make sure that you're not going to get too tremendously drunk, and also kind of reminding you along the way what to do to take care of yourself. Drink some water, eat a little bit of food in between stuff. 11,000 people have already signed up for it. So it's kind of an interesting future starting today, wherein which we are allowing bots to decide, if we've maybe had one too many or keeping an eye on us. And there's a lot of other bots like that. There's a depression chat bot called WoeBot, W-O-E bot. And there's a new AI platform that allows you to talk to an artificial person just in case you just want to feel like you have somebody to talk with. It's called Replika, but with a K. And I've been checking that out. Hey, Andy, thanks for being part of the show. Glad you could come along. So I'm glad you're here. Welcome. And the next piece of conversation is how and where do we find ways to make our customer service better? Well, the really big guys all have some interesting things in common. So, for instance, Thanks a Latte is the name of the article. But all the big guys, evidently, they have a whole bunch of different customer care opportunities wherein which they explain how to grow your business customer service skills by remembering certain letter things. So for Starbucks, the customer service recovery sequence is latte. Listen to the customer. Acknowledge the problem. Take action and solve the problem. Thank the customer and then explain what you did. Marriott's one is called Learn, which is listen, empathize, apologize, respond, and notify. And then the other one that goes after Marriott was Heart from a resort called the Broadmoor. Hear, empathize, apologize, respond, and take action. And then follow up, which is Heartif, but no one does that. And then there's all kinds of other ones. So the idea is that if you want, you can go to chrisbrogan.com/cbm, click through yourself, and look at all those acronyms. They're all really good. The one I was taught a long time ago were the 3 A's, which is acknowledge, apologize, and act. acknowledge that something happened, apologize for it happened, and take action and sort of explain the actions you're taking. These ones have just a few more nuanced steps in them, and I think for those reasons, they're worth checking out. I often tell people that if you want to see interesting new innovations and opportunities for business, you've got to look at other countries and see what's going on there to see if you can gauge or think about differently what's going on in your own. So for instance, Google just published the results of a connected consumer survey in South Africa. And so I picked it up to take a look at what's going on in Africa. And one of the things they pointed out was that kind of the online only sort of person is the default now. We can't think of people as not being online. So right now, South Africa's local population, 16 or older who use the internet, 65% compared to the global rate of 82%. So it's on the rise. This is a whole bunch of stats from South Africa. But what I liked about it is that it gives you a chance to go through those stats and think about in what ways does this impact you. In plant-based news, I have a fun story. Evidently, there's a bunch of pushback from various industries who are now feeling a little bit frustrated and threatened by the fact that plant-based companies are using look-alike kind of labels to explain their products so that people who are eating plant-based can understand what the product is supposed to be simulating. So for instance, this is a company called SunFed. They have something called chicken-free chicken. And the people who grow poultry are saying, we don't want you to be able to use the word chicken. This is very similar to dairy people in Europe who are mad that you call things almond milk or soy milk or any kind of milk that's not actually produced from cows or goats. And they're petitioning to get people to not have those kinds of labels as well. I think that it's a little fun because one of the things it points to is that these industries are feeling a little bit threatened. And on the second, it points to the fact that we as humans who consume food really can't in any way get behind, not putting them to some kind of a analog in our head that we say, oh, this is like supposed to be a chicken patty, which is interesting and I think probably makes a lot of sense. All the things I hear about plant-based food is that the very likelihood of any big adoption is going to come by fast food. So speaking of interesting plants and stuff, buddy John Ackley shares a story with a little video put out. Zoe Deschanel stars in it. It's a little video episode called Your Food's Roots. And so it's pretty cool. It's about less than 6 minutes long. And it goes through covering a whole bunch of story information. For instance, the fact that the bread that you eat isn't really in any way bread. And it goes through a whole bunch of other products and stuff that explains, what originally these products were versus what we're being fed these days and gives you the chance to think about what you're eating and whether or not it's a good choice. By the way, it turns out some of your food might be being grown in the future in storage containers in places like Brooklyn. Here's an example of something else that John shared. Fresh food is being grown in shipping containers in Brooklyn right now. This I have interesting to pair with another story that I found, which is that there is evidently a whole new culture of bots. Oops, a little slow coming to that. The future of hydroponic robotic farming in greenhouses. So not only is your food going to be possibly grown in shipping containers, but it's also going to be managed and maintained by robots. So at some point soon, there's going to be an opportunity where you have no old McDonald, just a bunch of droids, and you'll be eating food out of shipping containers. So it's kind of interesting, and it points to something about the fact that this is where we're coming. I met a really wonderful CEO, Sonia Lowe, who runs a company called Freshbox Farms in Massachusetts here, and she runs a container farm kind of a story, and it's very interesting, and it really points to, by the way, one difference is I had some of their lettuce and all that, and the lettuce is so much more flavorful than regular outdoors grown lettuce, I guess let's call it, and it has so much more resilience and strength to it, because what happens is lettuce grown outdoors has weather to deal with. It has more bugs, so it has more pesticides. It has more everything kind of assaulting what it is just to be lettuce. And whereas when it's growing in this container, it's just bathed in nutrients and food and light and treated to a really good life. So it's pretty interesting. I have an interesting customer service story. This one actually blew up in such a funny way in front of me because I was following this game. It's a video game story. And that is Electronic Arts has suspended transactions, microtransactions for Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, initially, this isn't necessarily a story where you're like, oh, that sounds interesting, Chris. But here's what makes this story interesting. So let me walk you through the story. Electronic Arts releases Star Wars Battlefront 2, built by this company called DICE. And in it, there are these microtransactions where you can spend some amount of money to get add-on parts of the game and all that. So this is something that's common in a lot of games now. Loot prizes and all this kind of stuff is now just a system inside of video games. Having downloadable content that you pay for after the fact is part of games. But the way they did it in Star Wars, it really was kind of pay to play, meaning you had to spend even more money if you wanted to unlock certain pieces of the puzzle, and you had to spend even more money if you wanted to get a leg up on your people you're fighting against in multiplayer battles. So for instance, if some 15-year-old borrows mom's credit card for $200, they can suddenly be way better than anybody else playing the game just because they bought their way into superior weapons, superior talents and abilities and all that. Electronic Arts, or DICE's community manager, went onto Reddit to sort of defend this process, to explain what they were thinking about it, and it became the most downvoted comment in the history of Reddit. Over 500,000 downvotes, and probably still going. The most downvoted comment in the history of Reddit, so that the obvious thing was that the community had lost their mind. They were just so mad about this. Electronic Arts did something really interesting at that point, which was they decided, you know what? Maybe you got a point. We're going to suspend this for a bit, and we're going to make sure that nobody, can be mad at us, because we're just going to take a step back and take a look at this. I think that's unique. That's unique because what ends up happening is that they, really listened to the community in a good way, and they gave them something to look at. As you know, I almost always end my show with geekery, and a story about Star Wars is pretty geeky, but I always like to show you some cosplay. This is from the New York Anime New York City 2017. This is the best cosplay. Let's zoom it in just a tiny, tiny bit. So here's some of the people dressed up. I don't know what those people are from. That's one of the things is with anime, I know far fewer of the characters than, say, video game characters. But they look like they had fun, and they look like they dressed up. That's a guy from, I think, Street Fighter 2, if I'm right. That's pretty fun. This is One Punch Man. I know that one. And there we go. So, as always, just love to share a little bit of fun with cosplayers. Why? Because I just think it's fun, and I think that it's neat to see how people put so much creativity towards a fan-based thing. There's no real reward to this besides the passion, and it reminds me of the old days of blogging in a way. So, if you want to look at these stories in depth for yourself, go to chrisbrogan.com/CBM. This will walk you right through the stories. You don't have to pay attention to me. You can go and click every single one of the links yourself. You can see what you want to share. You can follow the information. If you want to contribute stories in the future, just drop me a link, chris@chrisbrogan.com, or send me a message on Facebook, whatever makes you cheery. This is the brief. The whole idea is that I use these stories to show you trends and ideas of the future in some way that they might impact your business or your life, and I give you some concepts and thoughts to consider for your own processes. Hey, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for showing up, John, everybody, Terry, Mark. Thanks for being here. I'm so grateful for you. I'll catch you next time.